is Apple's latest iPhone Pro model, the iPhone 13 Pro. Now, I picked up the smaller variant of the Pro model iPhone this time around simply because I wanted to see what the experience would be like using somewhat of a smaller, normal size iPhone for my daily driver, coming from my previous phone, the iPhone 12 Pro Max. Also, what I wanted to do was to see if it's really worth upgrading to the iPhone 13 Pro, which is pretty much now just about 6 months since it has been launched. But for that, what I'll need to do is to have a little bit more time using the device to thoroughly test it, to really go through it and formulate my thoughts, which will be in my final review. So, of course, subscribe to the channel if you want to hear my findings and my opinions on that. But for this video, I wanted to share a quick unboxing and my first impressions of the device. The model that I decided to go with, as I said, is the iPhone 13 Pro, and I got it with the Sierra Blue colorway, which to me is definitely a much lighter blue when compared to last year's Pacific Blue on my 12 Pro Max. But of course, there are other color options that are available for the 13 Pro, with the Alpine Green being the most recent addition to the color options that you will be able to choose from. And in terms of storage, well, the Pro model phones offer up to 1 TB of space, which I think is actually pretty fantastic and a first for any Apple iPhone. Now, when it comes down to unboxing any Apple smartphone these days, it's hardly an experience, with the company moving more and more towards an environment-friendly packaging. Now, straight off the bat, I immediately noticed that there is no more protective plastic on the box. Just a simple pull tab and you just pop open the box and your phone is right there at the top. There are a few paperwork, of course, Apple stickers and a SIM ejection tool, and of course the Lightning to USB-C cable, which if anyone knows me knows that I'm not a fan of this, and I'm really hoping that Apple decides to change these out in the future to straight USB-C. But yeah, that's pretty much it. As I said, it's a very simple packaging. There are no charger or headphones that usually come paired with devices anymore. That's because, if you are not aware, Apple has already decided to drop those from their packaging. Nonetheless, the look and the feel of the iPhone 13 Pro for my first impressions are pretty much what I come to expect. It feels very premium and compact in my hand and looks just as impressive as it feels. But what I personally love is the matte frosted look that the phone has, combined with the surgical grade stainless steel sides, which is quite shiny and definitely prone to picking up a lot of fingerprints. Now, in terms of the size and handheld factor of the 13 Pro, I must say it feels just like the perfect size in my opinion. It's not too small or not too large in my opinion, and I'm a fan of the flat edge design that's coming from the 12 Pro. But for me, having used the much bigger 12 Pro Max, reaching across the device during my daily use, just simply gripping the device was just a really uncomfortable experience. But with the much smaller 13 Pro, this is not so much the case, and it just makes the device feel more tailored towards one-handed use. Now, taking a quick look at the display on the 13 Pro, there are some minor changes and improvements that Apple has brought to their latest Pro model iPhone. First off, and the most exciting improvement, is that the iPhone 13 Pro is now equipped with ProMotion display, which basically means that the screen has a 120 Hz refresh rate. Now, scrolling through the user interface is very slick, very smooth, and in my opinion, the animations throughout just looks really refined. Now, it's going to be a bit difficult to actually show this in video, but it is indeed a marked difference, and I'm actually happy that Apple has finally decided to bring this feature to the iPhone 13 Pro models, and hoping that this will actually be a feature we see across all model iPhones going forward. So far, it seems most apps that I use are utilizing this ProMotion feature. One thing to note is that Apple uses a variable clock rate for the display, which is a great advantage that really saves power when compared to regular 60Hz display. Now, the minimum refresh rate of the 13 Pro display is 10 Hz, and if something is moved on the display, the rate then adapts variably up to 120 Hz. Now, the overall OLED screen on the 13 Pro is what we come to expect. It's bright, the colors are vibrant, but at the top where the very infamous notch is where we realize that there is a slight change. Yes, the notch has gotten a bit smaller, according to Apple, 20% smaller. Now, although the notch indeed got somewhat smaller and narrower in width, it hasn't really affected Face ID whatsoever. But any additional benefit of having a smaller notch is still somewhat remain to be seen. Apple also took the opportunity and made one or two other minor improvements to the design. Compared to the 12 Pro, the standby button as well as the mute switch and the volume control have slipped down just a good bit. This makes it easier for people with smaller hands to operate the phone with one hand. Now, turning to the back of the device, and this is where we begin to see the more major differences between last generation iPhone and the current 13 Pro model, despite having pretty much the same design for the most part. The most striking thing is, of course, the camera module. This camera module is now wider than half of the iPhone, but the arrangement of the camera itself has not changed. It comes with a triple camera setup at the back with a 12 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide lens, and a 12 megapixel telephoto lens. The camera has also become deeper, so it protrudes further out of the housing than before. The really exciting innovation, however, is less hardware related than actually found on the software side. There are some really exciting new features on the iPhone, especially for videographers, such as the cinematic mode. Now, the cinematic mode is a kind of a portrait mode for videos where focus points can be set during and also after recording. Now, to me, it works just okay. It's a little bit buggy in my opinion, and it's not super fantastic. Now, another new feature that you'll get with the new camera software is the option of recording videos in ProRes format with the iPhone. Now, this means that even professional filmmakers or even professional content creators can use the iPhone temporarily for high quality recordings. There is a catch here, however. If you happen to have the smallest storage version of the iPhone 13 Pro, like the version that I have here, then this is only going to be possible in Full HD, as the video files are really and extremely large. Now, on the photo side of things, I did a quick test and took some photos on the 13 Pro with no adjustments in the settings. And as far as first impressions go, photos look great as expected. There's good contrast and dynamic range on photos come out looking really sharp. Now, another photo feature that you can actually come to expect to get with the iPhone 13 Pro is Photographic Styles. Now, this is actually something that pretty much applies filters to just a part of your image, which I found is kind of a useful thing if you're actually into that. And last but not least, there is now a macro mode for the ultra wide angle lens, which with that you can actually get up to 2 centimeters close to objects. And to me, it's a pretty cool feature that I found really useful and pretty fun to use. Now, the overall performance of the iPhone 13 Pro with iOS 15 has been a smooth experience overall so far. Now, there's been no lag or stutters so far from my usage, thanks of course to the 13 Pro's A15 Bionic chip and that 6 gigabytes of RAM. Now, Apple actually has managed over the years to demonstrate that they're able and very capable to do a fine job of optimizing their hardware and software, so I really don't expect that there will be any major issues with performance. Now, keeping on the topic of performance, battery life. Now, I must also say battery life has been pretty decent so far. Nothing major to report because, as I said, I really need to use the device for a bit longer to give a better impression of its performance in the long run. Now, I'm curious to actually see how much of a difference the 13 Pro in terms of battery performance is compared to my old 12 Pro Max, which actually is a bigger device with a bigger battery. Now, battery capacity on the 13 Pro is said to be around 3095 milliamp hour, which is actually better than its predecessor and actually promises to last at least an hour and a half longer than last year's 12 Pro. But in a nutshell, my first impressions of the 13 Pro is actually a positive one. Even though it's nothing that is overly groundbreaking in terms of new features, new tech, the few features and changes that we've gotten on the 13 Pro are definitely welcoming upgrades. But on the other hand, whether or not it is worth upgrading now is another topic to be discussed. Whether or not switching from the 12 Pro Max to the regular 13 Pro, the smaller 13 Pro, is also another topic to be discussed. And I'm going to be using the 13 Pro as my main device for the next few months, and I'll see if it's really worth going to the smaller 13 Pro as my daily driver. Anyways, that has been it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll definitely see you guys again in my next upload. Peace.